begin.
Okay, thanks. Good morning, and thank you, Rick, for the introduction. My intent for the next several minutes is going to be to provide a strategic overview of solar within the DoD. My points of interest will cover DoD's major muscle movements, some of their initiatives, programs, and policies, some of their challenges, and also the valued opportunities. So let me begin by setting the stage and framing DoD's role. DoD has a long-standing tradition and reputation for accelerating technological innovation, and it served as early adopters. And that impacts the broader commercial market. DoD has done this in many areas like aviation and computing, and GPS systems, weapons systems, and vehicles. So essentially, DoD serves as a huge laboratory and lays out the groundwork for a widespread adoption of new ideas, initiatives, and programs. Now, what we're seeing is we're seeing the same in the energy arena. And over the past several years, DoD has been spearheading a similar role in the renewable energy space. Now, there's several major supporting facts for this ongoing role. If you just look at between 2006 and 2009, DoD clean energy investments increased 300%. Put that in dollar values, that's $400 million increase to $1.2 billion annually. And the projection by analysts is for 2030 that will rise to $10 billion annually. DoD has also established a target goal by 2025 of 25% of its energy coming from renewable sources. So a good little quote is 25% by 2025. And DoD has created a zero energy environment initiative. That just means that the goal is to consume only as much energy as they generate. And just as recently as April of this year, DoD announced its long-term operational energy strategy, where renewable energy initiatives are a significant part of that strategy. Now, the major strategic point of interest, I think, to everybody on this webinar is that DoD's strategic focus on efficiencies gained from a greater reliance on solar energy technologies has the potential to create energy independence, shrink risk for our military personnel who are deployed, and reduce the DoD's overall carbon footprint, which is huge. And this will also drive clean energy innovation for our entire nation. Now, there are many challenges. The two major challenges that I'm going to speak about are energy usage and strategic vulnerability. So DoD is a massive energy spender. And FYI,
And Becky, if you could hold on just a second. I believe I lost the sound there. We're still on slide 5. And you can just chat to me if you know there's an issue on your end.
$1 billion on inflation, equipment, vehicle fuels. This drove assumptions. Yes, we are.
And we hear you fine now, Becky. Go ahead.
This level of dependence hits us in three major. Okay. This level of dependence really hits us in three areas: climate change, a high dependence on oil, and then a heavy reliance on increased fragile electrical grids. In the area of oil dependence, just last year, the Center for Naval Analysis Military Advisory Board called for immediate and swift action that over the next decade, they wanted to reduce oil consumption by 30% in the next 10 years. And this is significant in terms of the threat, for helping us against the threat to our own economy and putting us in a better global leadership position. There's a heavy reliance on an increasing fragile electrical grid. 99% of the DoD's electric energy infrastructure is commercially owned. So we must reduce these vulnerabilities. To do that, DoD must find solutions and drive innovation. DoD created an environmental security technology certification program, which is comprised of 27 testbed projects. Those are designed to test, evaluate, and scale up new and innovative energy technologies to reduce the $4 billion cost of powering its facilities and improve our security. The main areas in this program are what I would define as opportunities for those listening. Those include smart microgrids and energy storage at military installations, advanced component technologies to improve building energy efficiency, advanced building energy management and control technologies, and tools and processes for design, assessment, and decision-making associated with energy use and management. Another project is the Spiders Project, and this is a three-phase, $30 million project being conducted at Sandia National Labs. The focus of it is to reduce risk by building smarter, more secure, and robust microgrids that incorporate renewable energy sources, providing secure control of on-base generation as well as reducing energy bills and creating a level of independence from the commercial electricity grid. DoD has plans and continues to develop solar, wind, and geothermal and other distributed energy sources on bases. For example, in the Mojave and Colorado deserts alone, 7,000 megawatts of solar energy, which equates to about 7 nuclear power plants, could be generated on military bases. That is 30 times the electricity consumed, or about 25% of the renewable energy that California requires utilities to use by 2015. This creates a strategic potential for private developers, as they can tap into the solar potential on these installations with no capital investment requirement from the DoD. And the development potentially then nets the federal government up to $100 million a year in revenue or other benefits such as discounted power. A few other examples of current military programs that are in place are the Enhanced Use Lease Program. That enables commercial companies to fund, build, and operate projects in exchange for long-term leases on military bases. Fort Irwin, California, is one of the first major projects. DoD also has clean energy initiatives, which seek to reduce dependence on fossil fuels, and these initiatives are ongoing across all services. For instance, in the Marine Corps, they have developed what they call X-FILES, experimental files, and they're already deployed in forward operating bases in Afghanistan. At the lowest level, the platoon level, they're seeing savings as great as from 20 gallons a day for a platoon to 2.1 gallons a day for a platoon. If you start to expand that and what it costs for an entire theater, just saving fuel will save lives. In the Air Force, one of their greatest solar projects is at Nellis Air Force Base, and they have created a wonderful approach to public-private partnerships, making their energy supply more sustainable, more secure, and more affordable. And the Navy has huge plans, which they started this year with their Pacific Fleet exercise, but by 2016, they plan to deploy what they call the Great Green Fleet, which will be powered entirely by alternative fuels. There are significant opportunities to be part of the solution. DoD's budget for energy security initiatives has risen from $400 million to $1.2 billion in the past 4 years. Market experts project a steady increase of expenditures to include increased investing to improve DoD's energy profile at its fixed military installations. There are some challenges. There are some flawed incentives that have impeded some of the investment strategy. For instance, first users, they bear the significant cost, but get from the exact return as followers. And DoD does not yet have an enterprise-wide energy information management system. And that's needed to help monitor, measure, manage, and maintain energy systems at their optimal performance. And then, of course, collect and track performance data to improve that performance. DoD's fundamental investment strategy, though, seeks to reduce demand for traditional energy through conservation and energy efficiency and increase supply of renewable and other alternative energy sources. Investments that curb demand are the most cost-effective way to improve an installation's energy profile. Apologize, thought I turned that slide. So in closing, DoD's energy effectiveness and efficiency plans are designed to strategically maximize military performance and personnel safety. DoD will always be about accomplishing the mission and putting their people first. DoD is the single largest consumer of energy in the United States. So this puts DoD in a unique position to introduce innovative clean energy solutions on an enormous scale. They've been pioneering progress and leading the way for a long time in this area. By doing this, they're optimizing the nation's defense strategies. There is remarkable strategic potential. DoD will increase demand for partnerships, private sector financing, and the influx of investment dollars will lead to leading-edge research, technology, and business practices. And that's what I have in closing. Turn it over to you.
Great, Becky. Thank you very much for that strategic overview. Now I'm going to pass presentation control to Dave McNeil, who's going to give us a little bit more of a tactical perspective from his experiences working on the ground with winning and bids and installing solar systems. Dave?
Great. Hey, thanks a lot. Becky has done a great job in setting the stage here for us from a strategic level view of how the Department of Defense is looking at renewable energy. And what I'm going to try to do over the next few minutes here is bring this down more to an operational level of how they're going to implement this plan to achieve their goals. Talk a little bit about some of the specifics within the services. The important part of this will be really what are the contract vehicles that the government is going to use in order to try to implement this, which I think is really what all of us that are in the solar community and private business are really interested in, probably more than anything else. This next slide shows what's called the Penn State Energy Pyramid. I attended a conference a few months ago where the Navy facility engineers from NAVFAC talked about this model. And the issue here is, where does solar fit into this? And in some of Becky's slides, there are some large numbers and billions of millions of dollars. And some of my slides, you'll see some large numbers. But I think it's important to manage our own expectations in the solar community of where solar really fits in, because DoD is not focused specifically on solar. They're focused on energy. And they're not really focused specifically on renewable energy. They're talking about energy overall. Renewable is a part of the total plan. So where does that fit in? Now, this Penn State Energy Pyramid is not something that is a DoD-wide initiative to use this, but I know that Navy facility engineers, at least in the southeast region, have taken this as their way to try to determine where to get the bang for the buck. So when they have limited money, and the government does, our tax dollars, to try to determine how they're going to work their energy program, first they start at the bottom about how we conserve energy. So how are they going to invest the bigger amount of money they have for conserving it, followed by the efficiency of energy, followed by shifting demand, and lo and behold, at the back end of everything is where we sit with renewable energy. And once again, we're only part of the total program being with solar, which is what we're really here to talk about today. So I just kind of want to make sure that everyone understands exactly where we fit in the program within DoD's energy initiatives. And now, when we talk about energy consumption, this is relative to facilities and bases. This particular slide does not cover all energy because we're not talking about operational energy. And so if you're going to focus your bang for your buck as a solar integrator or someone in this business, this gives you an idea of who really has, who's consuming energy, and therefore who is more likely to be having money that they're going to put into their program. And of course, the Army is the largest service and the largest number of bases, and it's expected that they would have the largest consumption of energy from a base perspective. This slide tells us a little bit about current renewable energy production. And once again, when we talk about where solar fits in, if you look at these different services and some of their larger projects, solar is in there, but it is not at the top of the list. Solar heating is for the Army, and ground source heat pump is for the Air Force and the Navy. And then wind's in there as well. So solar's a part of their program, but there are a lot of other things that go on within the energy community and where DoD is spending their money. Now we'll talk a little bit about each of the services and their particular goals. And Becky talked about the Green Strike Group, Green Fleet. 2012 was their goal. I think they are shifting that to 2013 now. But what we're more concerned about is energy reduction on the bases and where solar would fit in for base energy as opposed to operational energy. And for the Navy, they're looking at 50% of their shore-based energy requirements to come from renewable energy. And the DoD-wide goal is 25% by 2025 and 50% by 2050. The Navy hopes to accelerate that. And they have a real specific demand, a goal by 2015 of reducing petroleum for their non-tactical vehicles on the bases, using a combination of hybrid fuel and electric vehicles. And there may be some opportunities for the electric vehicle fleet and for EV, PV charging stations in our solar world that we might be able to help them meet some of their goals when they're using the electric vehicles. The Air Force, of course, they've got a tremendous amount of fuel usage in their aviation, which is 50% reduction into an alternative blend. But what we're more concerned about in the solar world is the bottom part of this chart here, and where they have set their targets at 5% by 2010 and then up to 25% by 2025, which is also the DoD goal. And the Army has also matched those same requirements as far as renewable energy targets for their bases. Interesting point for the Army is they have developed a specific Army Energy Task Force, and they have set a goal to spend $8.7 billion over the next 10 years for renewable energy. Within that, they have not specifically set any goals for what is solar only. But we know there'll be certainly a percentage of that 8.7 billion that will be going toward solar renewable energy. And these are the overall DoD specific goals. We've talked about these as we've gone through the different slides for the services, because the services as a minimum are sticking with their DoD goals. None of them have chosen to really accelerate that, other than the Navy hopes to achieve their 50% long before 2050. And notice at the bottom, they have a goal of deploying 3 gigawatts of renewable energy. And of course, that is not, again, all necessarily solar. That could be biomass and wind as well. This is a very important slide because this gets down to the meat for the solar private community, how we participate in this program to help DoD achieve their goals. I'm going to talk through a little bit of these different contract vehicles. And one thing let me say before I talk about this is there are a lot of differences between the services on how they're going to achieve their goals, whether they're going to push those down to regional or base level or keep them at centralized. The Army, with this 8.7 billion Army Energy Task Force, are having more of a centralized approach. The Navy and the Air Force are looking more at pushing things down further. And what that means to us is when we as small businesses are trying to get into this, participate in this, we may have to be partnering or teaming with larger companies to meet some of the Army projections to get involved in those, to where we may have a easier opportunity for those projects that are more regional or based, because they'll be smaller projects and easier for small businesses to be able to bond and compete in. Another point before I get into the details of this, the differences between the services on their particular, if any of you have been in the military and you know it, you would think DoD is pretty consistent, but the services have very differing ways of doing business. And just about 6 months ago, the lawyers from the different services sat down and spent several weeks going over the different policies and procedures and rules and regulations that each services have had to try to determine a centralized way of doing business. because they found that the opinions of the different services on what they can and can't do varied quite a bit. Now let's talk about these particular contract vehicles. Purchase power agreements. This is an investment for private money to build, maintain, and operate renewable energy systems for the purpose of selling the power to the Department of Defense. There are a lot of challenges with this program right now, and this is where the lawyers have been working to try to come up with what are going to be the current rules for purchase power agreements, and a lot of that is pending right now. There have been several of these already, but we expect a large part of this, especially the Army Energy Task Force, $8.7 billion, to be through this purchase power agreement program. The second one, the Utility Energy Services Contract. This one is specific to utilities. They are the only ones that can participate in this. Through the Federal Energy Management Program of Department of Energy, there is a standard utility energy services contract that allows local power companies, gas companies, and water companies to enter into an agreement with the federal government for the purpose of providing private investment for renewable energy and for energy conservation. The interesting thing about this program is once the local utility has entered into this program with the government and signed a generic contract with some rules and policies about how they will do business, it gives them an opportunity without competition to go to any government agencies within the area where they provide the utility. For example, Georgia Power, if they have this process in place for any of the places they provide electricity in their Georgia Power territory, they can go directly to a base, a post office, a federal building, an Army Reserve Center, and say, we would like to offer you this program for private investment to conserve energy or to have some type of renewable energy. And then once that particular organization works out the terms of agreements, there's no competing, there's no bidding. And for renewable energy companies, it's an opportunity to get in with the local utilities because they have to have an installer to do the work. So that's a very unique program. And that program is, there's a Federal Utility Partnership Working Group that meets twice a year. The next one is in October. It's in Mobile, Alabama, hosted by Southern Company. And if you go to that conference every 6 months, you'll find out the specifics about this program. You'll have an opportunity to network with the different utilities that have signed up to this program and to find out how you might be able to work into this. Energy Savings Performance Contract, our third bullet here. This is a program where a private company has entered in with the military for energy conservation or for renewable energy. And they maintain and own and operate for DOD on a military installation these different systems. And this is a lot more than solar. This is often energy efficiency, such as upgrading HVAC systems, lighting systems, but it can also include solar, wind, biomass. And this differs from the UESC because now it opens up to any type of private energy company that wants to do business. They can compete. Often the government will put out bids for this, and then there are several EPSC contracts in place right now for some that many of the larger companies hold, Siemens and the Honeywell type companies. And there's an opportunity for smaller businesses to team or partner with them because for all these types of things where a large company goes into a contract with the government, they have subcontracting goals they have to meet. Enhanced use lease, that is very similar to purchase power agreements, but it's a more broader type vehicle because sometimes it allows a private company to invest and to lease land and sometimes facilities for a large period of time for other uses, sometimes directly for DOD or sometimes in support of DOD. But it's being used for the solar renewable energy business to lease tracts of land and then provide energy back to the government. The Energy Conservation Investment Program is money that's managed at OSD, provided down to the services, and allows the services to actually go out and buy systems that they would actually own and operate, which is different than third-party funding, which is all of the programs that I've listed up until now. The first four are all third-party investment. And then new military construction. Since January of 2011, the lead requirements for new construction for military as well as all federal government has often led to solar systems being included on a lot of the new construction that allows opportunities for us to be a subcontractor for large general contractors. OSD is Office of Secretary of Defense. I've had a question here. Could I clarify a couple things? And the NDAA is National Defense Authorization Act, which is basically the budget. Okay, moving on. This is a sample of a current program right now, Solar City, which is one of the large residential solar integrators that is really top in the market here in the last couple of years. They have worked a program with privatized military housing. And let me just explain about privatized housing. The military, about 10 years ago, started a program that they've been incrementally working every year through most all the military bases, where instead of the military actually owning the housing on the bases for the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine, Coast Guardsmen, they now have done this, basically the enhanced use lease type of program. It's a public-private partnership where a commercial company is giving the lease on 50 acres of land, and now they have the requirement to build new housing for the military. And then the housing allowance that each service member normally is given when they're off base, but they return to the military when they're on base, is now given to the private contractor. So this has allowed military housing to take a great leap in quality over the last 10 years, as these private developers are now actually owning and operating housing on the military base for the military. And they have taken it a step further because they are paying their own power bills within this public-private partnership. And in the case of Solar City, several of these military bases, private companies have partnered with Solar City, where Solar City will now own and operate rooftop solar installations on the privatized housing. So this here is another opportunity of getting involved on the military bases, and this particular process can be replicated at other privatized housing as well. To wrap up, as Becky has mentioned the large numbers, and I've mentioned some of the numbers, there is going to be a significant investment in renewable energy. And the Department of Defense has recognized, in my opinion, that investment in renewable energy is going to save them money in the long run, with the cost of energy continuing to increase and how much is taken out of the military budget. It's also an issue of energy security for the bases here, as well as energy security for operational energy. So that investment is planned. It's in the budget. As I mentioned, the Army has this 10-year program for $8.7 billion, and so we expect to be a significant investment to continue. And so with that, there are opportunities because of the 6 contract vehicles I mentioned. 4 of them all require private investment, and all of them require somebody to physically install systems, whether they're going to be owned by the military or owned by a third party. So there's lots of opportunities for those of us in the private solar community to get involved here in the future. The key is you really need to understand these different contract vehicles and how you can fit into those with your company in order to take advantage of participating in this, these programs that DoD is having for the future. And that completes my portion of the briefing.
Thank you very much, Dave. That was actually a fascinating amount of information. I'm going to take presentation control and move to the discussion part of today's webinar. Now again, if you have any questions for either of the presenters, you can chat those to host and I'll ask them out, or if you want to chat them to everyone, then people will see your name, but we'll answer those. As people are asking more questions, I've had a few that have come in. The first two actually were somewhat political in nature. I just wanted to say that the Principal Solar Institute is politically neutral. Our goal is to advance solar installation through whatever policies there are in place, not to necessarily promote one policy or the other here. But first of all, the question was from Larry. It was in reference to Becky was mentioning the national security and strategic reasons to green the military. What are your thoughts about recent moves in both houses of Congress to prohibit the military from using anything but the lowest cost energy, which is currently fossil fuels?
Well, you know, one of the things I think about when I read that question is that, I mean, I think all of us want our congressmen and women to be in a position of being very prudent with our taxpayers' dollars, but they also recognize, I think very strongly, that when we are dealing with our defense and the security of our nation, the two statements that Dave mentioned at the end of his conclusion, which is, you know, recognizing that this investment up front saves money in the long term, and then of course energy security is also for both our bases at home and our operational security forward. I think the piece that we haven't talked much about, but I think that both DoD and Congress need to always do an as-is check on is the fact that it's very important for us to be efficient, and that goes to the lowest cost energy, but we have to strike a balance then with also being effective. And what strikes me on that is, you know, doing logistics in Iraq, my number one challenge was moving millions of gallons of fuel by truck, ground convoys, every single day within Iraq. You know, 70% of our convoys was fuel, and that fuel was for things like generators to power our bases. And so I think, although sometimes at large we hear a statement that says, hey, you must go for the cheapest fuel, I would say that has a big it depends. It depends on, you know, when you can, you should, to be efficient, but we can never lose sight of this effectiveness, which means we have to place our people first. So investment in renewable energies that reduces the amount of fuel being transported, for instance, in combat, has huge significant second and third order effects in terms of reducing the number of people on the road, which then reduce the number of casualties. And it's not just fuel for vehicles. This has to do with batteries that operate our different systems. So there's just, I could name about 8 to 10 different second and third order effects. So bottom line, I think we're always going to have to strike that balance between effective and efficient. And sometimes we have to remind our leaders of that, not so much on the DoD side, but sometimes within Congress because they're going for the budget.
And if I could offer a second perspective on that for Larry. The point is, going back to the original thought of the question, is should we be required to use the lowest cost of energy? The question is, I would say the lowest cost based on today's dollars or future dollars. One of the things we talk about in the solar industry is the levelized cost of electricity. With a 25-year warranty for an average solar module and a real live expected lifetime of 40+ years, if you look at the investment now that may be more expensive than fossil fuel in a solar system or even a wind or biomass system, and then you levelize the cost of that out over 30 to 40 years, considering an average increase of power between now and the 30 or 40 years, I think that the investment is going to greatly outweigh the long term. So if you kind of put that into perspective of the lowest cost of energy, and not just here, now, today in this year's defense budget, but the lower cost of energy in the long haul, which is how we should be thinking of everything we're doing. Whether, you know, when you look at your investments on a personal basis in buying a home or a car or how long it's going to last, or we're investing in facilities or equipment, or, you know, the cost of an M1 tank and the value of it is going to last how long versus an old Soviet T-72 tank and the value of it and how long it'll last. It's all a matter of perspective on what is really the lowest cost.
Okay, thanks, David. There was a follow-up question during Becky's portion that was related to her comments about the supply lines, and it was from Kathy. How much does it cost in blood and treasure when supply lines are cut off for fuel transport, such as the 45-day blockade on the route to Afghanistan from Pakistan?
Well, I think the thing that has to look at there is, I'm sorry, Dave, did I step on you?
No, go ahead. I'm glad for you to take this one.
Okay, no problem. Well, I think there's no way to define in terms of blood and treasure. I think what we have to look at when we know that we have had a supply line interdicted, flows, we in all of our strategic planning make sure that we have, you know, all kinds of materials and supplies pre-positioned so that we can deal with that scenario, so that we don't, in fact, have a great loss in blood and treasure. Now, you know, the thing that I think is, you know, equally important there is the concept is that we have to move even less on a daily basis. We can stay operational longer when we have an interdiction. But at the end of the day, when you go back and look at the last 10 years, not so much on this particular instance that Kathy makes note of in the 45-day blockade, but when you go back and look at the last 10 years and you say, okay, 70% of our ground convoys in Iraq were delivering fuel, and I look at the casualties of wounded in action and killed in action in my own unit, you know, 70% easily of those casualties came through combat logistics operations on the ground, maybe not always delivering fuel. So as a commander, you always want to minimize, absolutely minimize those costs. And so the number one way to do that is, of course, have to transport less. So that demand to transport be less because you have less targets. So I think that one of the things we are very good about in DoD and in combat is that we take measures to be able to be independent 45 to 60 days in case of a large interdiction like that in our supply line.
That's great. That's a very tough situation that you're in. I'll go on to the next question. This was during Dave's portion on Visa. Is there a Buy American requirement for DoD installations?
This is Dave. Yes, there is very much a Buy America requirement for any DoD, and a recent ruling by Congress about 5 or 6 months ago also changed Buy America for the third-party investment. Because up until then, if third party was going to buy, own, operate, maintain a system on a military base, they could use whatever equipment they wanted, no matter where it was from. But Congress closed that loophole several months ago, so now any third-party investment on military installations requires Buy America. And to be honest with you, Buy America is not real, it's a moving target because what a lot of people don't realize is the silicone cells that go into solar panels, a large majority of the silicone is made in the United States. And then the United States ships that overseas to China and everywhere else, and then they make solar panels. So, you know, the question comes in, well, now wait a minute, if we're providing the bulk of the silicone, but then the Chinese are making the panels, does it meet Buy America or not? That there's been a lot of questions on that here recently, but there definitely is a Buy America requirement, and you've got to make sure the company you're working with can provide a document that they've been certified as Buy America before you plan for any of that type of equipment for anything being installed by the U.S. federal government, not just Department of Defense.
And there were two follow-up questions to that one. Is the Army Energy Task Force issuing RFPs, or is it managed entirely by the Huntsville Corps of Engineers?
You know, that is a good question. We are waiting for Huntsville to come out with these large RFP process, but that is not going to be everything that's from the Army Energy Task Force. That is just one particular way of this large Huntsville RFP that's pending. It's not going to be the entire thing, but we really don't know because we're still waiting for guidance to come out as to how they're looking to spend this $8.7 billion.
And the follow-up to that was, will the individual Army installations issue RFPs in addition to the task force's overall RFPs?
That is still to be determined, and you know, frankly, I don't know. We don't know right now, but what I have seen in the last few months is that the Army, more so than the other services, is maintaining things at a centralized level, and everyone's kind of waiting on Big Army to put out the guidance, to where the Navy, the Marines, the Air Force have been more willing to put out regional and base level RFPs. And probably some of it depends on the particular budgets. The bases and the regions have some flexibility if they have it within their own budgets, and sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. Another thing that we've seen recently is for new military construction, there have been quite a few projects that have been released without solar or a small level of solar to a general contractor, and after the bid has been released some matter of months later, that particular service has found additional dollars in their budget and have gone back and said, okay, general contractor, you won this project. Now tell me what it would cost to put X amount of solar on this as an option. So that has happened quite a bit. I've won a couple of contracts that are after the fact solar add-ons to under construction projects.
Okay, and another one was from Kathy. How does the military handle training of installers within the military bases, I guess?
Well, they don't. I guess I'm not sure if you're talking about the training of the people who are doing the installation versus those who are going to maintain it, but let me kind of mention both. The gold standard for solar installers is to be certified by the North American Board of Certified Energy Practitioners, NABCEP. Many of the states that have incentive programs are now requiring NABCEP certified installers, or to have at least one on site or one involved in the design. And most of the RFPs, almost every one that I've seen over the last year, have a requirement in it that you must have a NABCEP certified designer installer on site or in charge or participating in the installation.
Okay, and this one came back to Becky's point, some of the comments she had. How will the DoD's clean energy investments, be expected to be affected by the lumen sequester? I guess that's if the Department of Defense budget was cut. I've seen numbers $500 billion over 10 years or $600 billion. how would that affect the clean energy investments?
Well, again, I think we kind of both touched on that a little bit already. I think it's going to be very difficult to know how much it'll affect it. You know, I would say that I could go as far as to say that if this is important enough to our independence and our security at home and abroad, then with budget cuts that are out there and looming for the Department of Defense, that in this particular area, it may be minimally impacted because of, and again, Dave mentioned this a couple of different times, because the short-term investment is going to provide a long-term payoff. And in fact, you know, I think as we mentioned, maybe not earlier today, but maybe it was yesterday, is that if the long-term costs end up going down, we're actually saving money for our budget. So, you know, I think it's very difficult to know, but I somewhat suspect that based on the programs that are in place and the goals that have been set, maybe some of the goals will be minor adjustments, but I think there'll be a steady momentum to make these increases, even with budget cuts.
And Dave, did you have any further opinion on that?
Well, you know, who knows? It's hard to predict. I mean, every time I read Army Times every week, they talk and, you know, doom and gloom if those cuts go into place. And, you know, the bottom line is, while this is a great investment in our levelized cost of electricity and our security, if, you know, there are smart people in the Department of Defense, and they're going to make the tough choices when they have to, and whether, you know, if it gets down to, you know, providing soldier medical coverage and pay and fuel to go in the tank versus buying a solar system, well, you know, you're going to have to put your priorities at whatever they're going to be based on whatever your budget is. And all those smart people in the DOD are going to make those tough calls based on how bad is. And there's really no way for us to really know that right now. You know, I think the DOD understands the significance of the investment, that why they need to make it, and they'll just have to make those calls when they see how bad it is or is not come January.
Okay, another question we had was, what large-scale solar opportunities are available on forward operating bases, and what's the best way to get more information about that? I assume that means outside of the United States.
Yeah. I don't know of any, frankly, large-scale opportunities on forward operating bases, because by very definition, a forward operating base is not an enduring facility. And to invest a solar system in a non-enduring facility, when you're looking at a large cost and the fact that it's expected to last, you know, 30, 40, 45 years, that's not happening. You know, now we have bases overseas that are long-term bases, like in Europe, where we've been for 65 years, and the military is investing in those long-term permanent facilities where we have agreements with host nations. But there are different short-term investments and mobile systems that are, especially the Marines have taken a great lead in coming up with their operational energy solutions. Tents that have thin film solar over top of them, tarps that have thin film that roll out and lay in place and collect enough power to run a battery for a radio, and small scale stuff. But there is nothing large scale being invested overseas that I know of at any forward operating base, because it's just not feasible.
Yeah, and like you said, they're small and they're short term, or they're intended to be short term. And everything that I've read shows initiatives that really are from platoon to brigade. So you're talking, you know, a fob that just has a security platoon on it, you know, with 20 to 30 people, to a brigade of to 2,400. Like, for instance, the Army has what they call the smart and green energy for base camp. But again, it's for very small scale, and then the X-FOB for the Marines. But if that's the question is on those sort of forwarding operating bases, then the intent is to be mobile and tentative by your forward operating installations like Europe or Korea.
Well, and there's also some real political implications when we're in a country such as Iraq and Afghanistan, and we start building facilities that are 20, 30, 40-year-old of lifespan, you know, it starts saying, well, wait a minute, how long are you guys expected to be here? So I think, you know, they look seriously at everything they do at what is a expeditionary base or forward operating base. It's not intended to be there permanent, and I don't think we want to give that signal.
Right. We're very careful not to give any sort of perception of occupying, and that's very, very important to the way we do this business.
So it sounds like the forward operating bases, if you wanted to be involved there, you have to have a mobile product that's probably outside the scope of what we've been talking about with kind of the permanently installed solar systems here.
Exactly.
I think we have time for one more question before we close up. It was, how can I find the request for proposals for solar military projects? And do set-asides for minority contractors apply to the spending, and how does that work?
Yeah, I can talk on that. Most all projects are listed through the FedBizOps website, and that's where you can find them. Now, the question is, how do you find them? Because it's such a huge website, and there's thousands and thousands of entries every day. You know, everything from a few $1,000s of pencils on up. And so, what you really need is a search engine. There are private companies that will be glad to sell you that opportunity to give them money every month and let their computer search engine go through there and hunt for key buzzwords, solar, PV, things like that. But there's a way of doing it for free for small business, actually. I'll share it with you. There's an organization called the Procurement Assistance Centers, PACs. These are partially funded by the Defense Logistics Agency and partially funded by different educational institutions around the country. And their goal is to help small businesses learn how to do business with the government. And so if you just do a Google search for Procurement Assistance Centers, it'll tell you which ones are local. They're normally connected to a university or a college, several in every state. And as a small business located in that state, if you go and sign up with the Procurement Assistance Center, they have classes that they give for free, they have advice they give for free, and they offer typically a free search engine as well. Now, as far as the set-asides, the Federal Acquisition Regulation gives specific guidance of how set-asides are done, and there are certain goals to be met. For example, service-disabled veteran businesses have a national goal of 3% of contracting that the federal government, their goal is to give to service-disabled veteran-owned businesses. And there's set-asides for minority businesses, for women businesses, for hub zone, which is highly underutilized business zones. And so different contracting offices determine which contracts that they will set aside that you have to be in that category to compete. And that varies from base to base, from region to region, service to service. They all have to meet that goal that's designated by DOD, but how they implement it's a little different. The one thing is, any large contract that goes to a large company that's not a small business, they have their own internal subcontracting goals where they are supposed to meet the same percentages. So even if you're not competing as a small business for a small business contract, you can still compete as a subcontractor to large businesses because they have those requirements. And sometimes if you have that designation, it will help you over someone who doesn't to potentially get a subcontract for a large business.
Okay, great. And I am going to take one last one since we started a little bit late with my audio issues, because this was also an interesting security-related question. Michael said that he recently read an article on defensetech.org about Chinese backdoor kill switches integrated into DoD-grade microprocessors. And with American energy security paramount to renewable integration, his opinion was that American-made modules and products should be preferable. So his question is, are there plans to use truly American-made products, which are American companies with 100% American manufacturing? And I think, Dave, you had mentioned about kind of some of the complexities of the global supply chain, so maybe you can start there, and then Becky could.
Yeah, it's not an easy answer because it's just, you know, we are a global world now when it comes to our economy, and large businesses, you know, we put our plants in Mexico and through Southeast Asia, and Chinese, Spanish, German companies are coming here and putting their plants here. Is it wrong? You know, is it right? Does it bypass? You know, at what point is it American company versus not American company? Those are some complexities in the global economy that I really can't answer. If it meets the congressionally designated legal requirements of Buy America, then it's Buy America, and that has, as I mentioned before, that's been somewhat of a moving target. Because there have been companies that will manufacture everything but, you know, one bolt or something and send it to the United States and have an American stick a bolt in the corner and say, okay, now it's American made. So there's a lot of complexities to this, and I don't know. I haven't seen anything that talks about any changes. When you say truly American-made, I guess you're talking about maybe designed by a company that's primarily owned by an American. There's no easy answer here.
The only thing I'd add to that was a piece of his question that was concerned about security because of that. You know, no matter how you label it, as you dissect it, I think what's prudent is how do we make sure the right quality control measures are in place so that there is in fact no vulnerability when it comes to security of, you know, bad parts being installed, you know, a breakdown in our system. So, you know, you could say made in America, but as we dissect that, as pieces of parts come from other places, how do we make sure that they meet a standard that give us the performance that we need on that equipment? I mean, that performance is going to tie to security. So, you know, when it comes to quality control, I think that's something we have to look at very carefully.
Well, and the other thing is when a company that has been primarily from overseas decides they're going to make a major investment into a community or to a state, then, I mean, I'll give you an example. Airbus just announced that they're going to have a plant in Mobile, Alabama. It was in the paper in the last week, and they're going to start building Airbus here in the United States. Okay, well, you know, everywhere you look, the congressional representatives from Alabama and the city of Mobile, and everyone is 100% behind that, because what that means is suddenly you've got its economy, and it's jobs, it's investment in the community. So this makes it all more complex. If someone's willing to invest millions or billions into your community, your city, your state, now suddenly Congress, you know, representatives may have a different opinion on what is American-made and what isn't, because they're looking out for their representatives. And is that right or wrong? Well, you know, I don't know, but it is what it is.